Hey guys, we're doing another Chapter 5 video here for Section 2 in our textbook if you're in our class, so that'd be 5.2 for the topic. And our essential question today is, what is a proportion? And a proportion is a really big idea that's very, very important. It's very foundational in algebra, but it's also just really applicable to real life. So this is kind of getting into the basics here today. So let's start with, what is a proportion? If we had to use the mathematical definition of it, what is it? Well, really, it's just two equal ratios. That's all it is. And two equal ratios is a fancier way of saying two equal fractions. That's what a proportion is. So a really easy example would be 2/4 and a half. We know that 2/4 and 1/2 are actually the same fraction. So that makes them a proportion also. They're equal fractions. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to look at some problems and we're going to decide, is it a proportion? Is it really a proportion? So that's our question. Is this a proportion? And our fractions are 6/4 and 8/12. So if it's a proportion, then these would have to be equal fractions. So here's one strategy. We could put them in simplest form. We could take the 6/4 and the 8/12 and we could write them down, and then we could divide them down to make them something smaller. Now 6/4 could divide by 2. I know that for a fact. 6 divided by 2 would be 3, and 4 divided by 2 would be 2. So we would have 3 halves, 3/2. 8 and 12 are also going to divide by 2, but they could divide by 4, which is a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go for the biggest number I can divide by. So if I divide by 4, 8 divided by 4 is 2, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. So we get 2/3. Now these two fractions are not the same thing. They're opposites. 3 halves and 2/3, their numerator denominators are flipped. They're not matching. Since they're not equal, we know this is not a proportion. That's what that tells us. Okay, let's try another one. Is 6/8 and 18/24 a proportion? Are those equal fractions? Let's do the same process. We're going to put them in simplest form. So 6/8 and 18/24, we're going to write those down. Let's divide them down. I think we can divide by 2 for the first one. 6 and 8 both divide by 2. That'd be 3 and 4. So we get 3/4 as our simplest fraction. 18 and 24 can also divide by 2, but let's go bigger. Why don't we divide by 6? The biggest number I think that can fit into those things. So 18 divided by 6 would be 3, and 24 divided by 6 is 4. So look what we get. We get 3/4 and 3/4. We get equal fractions. And if they're equal, yes, it's a proportion. This is a proportional relationship. All right, your turn. You've seen a couple of these. Why don't you try? I'd like you to see if 10/3 and 12/6 is actually a proportion. Hit the pause button on your device and see if you can do this all by yourself. All right, so you're unpausing the video. You've already done your math. You've decided yes or no of whether it's a proportion or not. And now we're going to check it. So let's look at these two fractions. 10/3 is kind of interesting because what can you divide 10 and 3 by? Nothing in common. 10 divides by like 2 and 5, but 3 doesn't. So 10/3 is kind of in its simplest form, unless we want to make it a mixed number, and I don't really care about doing that. But 12/6 we could divide down. I know that 10/3 we're kind of stuck with, but 12/6 could divide by 6. 12 divides by 6 and gives you 2, and 6 divided by 6 gives you 1, so you get 2/1. But what is 2/1 really? 2 divided by 1 is 2. These are not equal. 10/3 and 2 are not even close. So if they're not equal, it is not a proportion, which is, I hope, what you got when you paused the video and tried this by yourself. All right, guys, so that kind of wraps it up for this video. There will be more on this because that's not the only strategy to determine a proportion. But I really want you to remember today that proportions are two equal ratios, two equal fractions. And like I said, look for more videos. I will see you later.